Welcome to today's Tutor Talk, and today we're going to be talking about exam results and what to do if perhaps things don't go your way. So first of all, a few quick introductions. So my name's Sarah and I'm one of the ActEd tutors. I teach mostly the later subjects and I've been at ActEd for about 11 and a half years now. And today I am joined by my colleague Anna. Anna, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, yes, I've been at ActEd nearly 20 years, and
Wow, that's a long time.
yeah, it's a long time now. It's still good though.
Yeah.
And I teach a real mixture of maths and wordy subjects. I teach CM2 and then CP1 and SP9.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So, as I said at the start, we're going to be talking about exam results today. It's always a stressful day, and nothing we're going to say today is going to take away that stress. But hopefully, we're going to offer a few techniques for perhaps dealing with the results. Results may go well, and you may have passed everything that you sat, and you can proceed as you planned into the next sitting, and congratulations. But the actuarial exams are hard, and they don't always have the highest pass rates. And so for quite a lot of students, and I think myself included, and I think Anna as well, you won't pass everything first time, and you will have to deal with what you do if you fail. And for lots of actuarial students, I think this is often your first time in your life when you might have to deal with that failing of an exam, and it can feel like quite a difficult moment. So we're going to talk about what to do if you fail. I guess the first thing is don't panic. I think that's all of our first instinct is, oh, it's all gone wrong, but don't panic. And we'll talk about kind of some strategies. But it can be really hard to deal with, can't it, Anna, failing?
Yeah, I think you go through a range of emotions,
Yeah.
and with hindsight, recognizing that those emotions are normal is really important. I failed what's now CP3, the communications paper, the first time I sat it. I initially felt really upset and quite embarrassed going into work because I'd passed everything else, and this was the first time I'd failed. And then gradually that emotion turned into anger. Anger a bit with self, but also with external factors. So anger with the exam paper because I hadn't really understood the question, anger with work pressures, which meant I wasn't the best prepared when I went into the exam. And it's actually very normal when you fail an exam to attribute it to external factors. When you pass, you attribute it to yourself and how hard you've worked. But when you fail, you tend to blame it on everything else and everyone else.
That's so true.
Yeah, it is true. But gradually those emotions subside, and that's the point where I think you then need to start being a bit more constructive and start putting a plan in place.
Yeah, I failed was CT8, so I think that's now CM2. I actually failed it twice, so I passed it third time. But I think I was perhaps slightly different. I think I knew I had failed it. I'd taken on a bit too much that sitting. So for me, it was more of a learning around what I attempted to do in a sitting and not overstretching myself to try and get through everything as quickly as I could. And so, yeah, I think I suspected all along that I probably wouldn't get it, and I didn't. The second time I was really disappointed, actually, and more of those kind of emotions, like you said, because I felt like I'd put in the work that time. I'd had more time. I hadn't taken on too much. So that sitting, I was really disappointed. So yeah, I completely agree with you about that kind of disappointment.
One good thing though about failing an exam, it does teach you humility, and later on in your career you go on perhaps to manage small teams of people, and having that empathy for other people who then go on to fail is important.
Absolutely. So what should we do if you do fail then? What's the kind of first steps?
So I'd say once the emotions have subsided, don't dwell too much on the actual exam paper that you failed. It's done. You can't change the outcome. We need to move on, and it's important to try and recognize the reasons for failing, and to have a really honest self-reflection on what didn't quite go as well as you thought it could. I'd say talk to people as well. It's, you can be absorbed in your own world, but if you can talk to a friend, family, work colleagues, an ActEd tutor, just share that frustration.
A coach
is really important. A coach, if you're an apprentice, a coach. and use those people as sounding boards to try and come up with a plan to move forwards.
Yeah.
And just know that you can go into the exam the next time with a really positive mindset. If you change something, you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth saying as well, lots of other people will have failed. They may not be so vocal about it, but if you approach them and you say, oh, I'm really disappointed, they might have a story to share on a similar theme as well. So yeah, I'd absolutely talk to people. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really important. And you're right. Yeah, you need to change that mindset, don't you? So next time you can pass it. Just because you've not got it once, that doesn't mean that the same thing will happen again. You will absolutely get it. There are a few different options though, aren't there, when you fail? Because partly because where the exam results come out, often students have already started studying for the next sitting. So I think there's sometimes a bit of uncertainty about kind of what to do. So what should students do? What are the options, Anna?
I don't think there's any right option, Sarah.
Yeah.
It's if you've started studying already, you could retake the failed subjects alongside the ones that you're studying for the next sitting. You could defer the failed subject until the following sitting, so stick with your original plan for what you were going to take.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, you could retake the subjects you failed and change what you were going to sit this time round. It depends on lots of factors, your capacity for workload, stress, pressures. You were talking earlier about not taking on too much.
Yeah, I think that's the risk, isn't it? If you decide to do the one that you failed with the ones you've already started studying for, you run the risk of not getting anything the next sitting because you just spread yourself too thin. So I think there's a real danger of that, isn't there? If you take on too much. I did both. So at one time I resat the next sitting, and then I had a break, and then I gave it a year, and then came back to it, and that's the time I got it. And I think maybe we'll talk later on about different things that maybe changed during that period, but a bit of perspective helps as well. And time is a great healer.
Yes.
So, I think that helped me as well. But yeah, you mentioned the option there to change subject. And I think sometimes students, I think, are kind of too far down the line, aren't they, with preparing for that to really be something that would be a good idea at that point.
Yeah, you've maybe already started the tutorials and done an assignment. Yeah, my gut feel is not to change what you were planning to sit.
Yeah, no, I'd completely agree with that. I'd say, if you can add it on relatively easily, then that's fine, and you think you've got time. But yeah, otherwise, wait a year. The exam will still be there in a year's time. It's perhaps unfortunately not going anywhere, but it will be there, and it'll be waiting for you when you can make a good attempt at it. So in terms of doing that resit, then, what materials are available? Because there's some different, sort of slightly different offerings, aren't there, if you're doing a resit?
Yeah, so if you sat the exam in the April sitting, your materials should still be valid for the September-October sitting. If you failed the exam in the September-October sitting, then the materials are updated for the following year. So it depends whether there have been minor updates or major updates. If there have been minor updates to the course, chances are you'll be able to download a free core materials pack upgrade off the ActEd website, and you can update your study materials in that way.
I'll pop a link to the page on the below the video.
Good idea.
If you want to get that.
Yeah, if there have been major changes to the course, then you may need to repurchase the course again at a discounted retaker price.
So once you've ordered your materials and you're ready for the next sitting, I think it's probably worth thinking about what, or perhaps why, you didn't get it in the previous sittings, whenever you sat it before. What are some of the reasons that maybe people don't pass then, Anna? Some of the reasons.
There's so many reasons, aren't there? Just not being familiar enough with the material, the content of the course, not understanding some of the concepts, especially in the mathematical subjects. With the online exams, I think time management is a real issue. Having to type formulae, type quickly, maybe weren't quite efficient enough. Exam technique with the later subjects, just not tailoring your answer enough to the specifics of the question, All sorts of reasons. Can you think of any more?
Oh, I mean, for me, it was a combination, I think, of everything you've just mentioned. It was lots of those things. It wasn't any one thing in isolation. It was not being familiar enough, not having the time to do lots of enough past paper questions. I'm not sure for me it was ever exam technique, but it was all of those other things that you've mentioned without a doubt. So yeah, you kind of get into a vicious cycle then, don't you? That you're just, because you're not familiar, you don't want to do the past paper questions because they're not going to go well, and it all just kind of flows. So once you've kind of thought then about what the problem was, what are some of the things we can do to make sure that we don't do that again in the next sitting? What could we do to correct that?
So I think it's important to try and change something so that we're not repeating the cycle. And also, if you're changing something, you're more likely to go into the exam the next time with a positive mindset. Yeah. So we could change the way that we prepare for the exam. So if the problem last time round was that there just wasn't enough time left to practice past exam papers, we could build in more time for that. Yeah. If we hadn't done things like assignments and mocks and got some feedback on our writing style and our question answering, then that's something that we could consider. So for the later subjects, if exam technique was what was letting you down, it's worth thinking about how you can address that. For example, do you go into the exam with some prompt lists for dealing with certain words in questions? If it was familiarity with the content of the course, then the flashcards are great. The revision booklets are great for certain subjects such as CP1. We've got sound revision in place if you prefer listening to the material.
Yeah. I completely agree with everything you've just said there. And I just want to jump in. Thinking about those later subjects, I do think there's a temptation. Sometimes people, I think they need a different study approach, the later subjects. Mm-hmm. And I don't always think everybody changes enough to adapt to those later subjects. And I've seen a lot of students fall foul of that. They've just sort of kept going, with their kind of approach they use for the early mathematical subjects. And that doesn't translate when you're then doing these subjects where actually you just need to learn an awful lot of written content in order to be able to do well in those exams. So yeah, I'd agree that, yeah, definitely sometimes a different approach is needed.
There's a temptation, isn't there, in those later exams that because the exam's open book, we can look things up in the exam, but actually there's not really time to do that, is there?
No, there really isn't. Yeah, no, I completely agree. So when you mentioned you had a blip in your exam history, what did you change?
I practiced more questions with hindsight, and that's always a beautiful thing. I'd probably only done 3 past papers the first time I went into the exam, so I did far more, maybe 10, 11, 12. And I was quite lucky because I was due a rotation at my work, and I put forward to be in a team where they were replying to customer complaint letters. So on the job, I was getting some practice with CP3.
Yeah.
What did you do?
I actually had a really similar thing. I ended up taking a role on a team where we were building replicating portfolios to value different investments. So I had really hands-on experience of material that was covered in what was then CT8. So I found that really useful, understanding how the concepts applied in my work. And I also think I got it because I was a year down the line. I got a bit more experience, and I did, like you said, I did far more questions, and just had more experience and was just more comfortable within it. For me, it just took a bit longer to get that than perhaps it did some others. But yeah, I think it is important to change something and not just try and do the same things. The other thing I just quickly want to mention as well is mock exams. You've touched on those earlier. For me, they were hugely important, and I think they prevented me failing other subjects, particularly my first later subjects. I didn't do well on the mocks, but I had time to change it before the exam. And if I hadn't done that mock, I'm convinced I would have failed the exam. So I think the mocks are really, really valuable. I'd say for the ones I passed as well, when I passed CT8, I did a proper attempt at a mock as well. And I hadn't done that before. I'd never been ready for the mock. I made sure I was ready and I did a good attempt at it. So that made a difference as well.
I completely agree. I'd never score well on the mocks. I'd score 30-40%, but the learning that then came from it, oh my goodness, that was invaluable.
I completely
And
agree.
yeah, and there are 3 mocks for each subject. So even if you've
absolutely.
done the mock A, there's also mock B, mock C, and yeah, the feedback from the markers I was found very valuable.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. They saved me on a few occasions, those markers. So yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Anna. That's been really interesting. I think we've got some really useful tips in that video. Good luck to everybody sitting their exams, for taking research, for preparing for the next exams. If you do need any help or advice, please reach out. We are here to help you. If you've had tutorials, get in touch with your tutor. If you're worried at all, we are all here to support you. So yeah, please do get in touch if you're at all concerned. Thank you ever so much for watching today. Thank you to Anna for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the next Tutor Talk.
Thank you. Bye.